perusing niche corners of the internet, as I tend to do, I came across a document known as the Book of Knowledge. And I had never heard about this before, and I can find very little online about this document. The only other thing that comes up is an encyclopedia by the same name, but is just an encyclopedia. And what pulled me into this was really the title and the fact that it's trying to be some sort of new age spiritual Bible. And it explicitly says this, that it will become the next Bible, or that it says it's destined to become the next Bible, and that it'll hold just as much spiritual weight and more as the Bible did. And the author, another thing that interests me about this is that the author is remaining anonymous out of concern for his safety. It does say that in the future, this author may claim credit for this writing, but that you should only believe him if he shows all the powers demonstrated in this book. And that what this book is a textbook on paranormal abilities and describing how to get all of them. And it really starts all of these paranormal abilities with what it calls quiet mind meditation, frequently abbreviated QMM throughout the book. And quiet mind meditation is just a very simple form of mindfulness meditation where you clear your mind and try to dispel of all thoughts. And that's kind of the foundation for all of these practices. And I would also like to say that I don't endorse this nor believe it. I just find the idea of somebody trying to create like the next great text, I find that interesting. So that's kind of what pulled me into it. But in it trying to be the next Bible, I feel like it kind of fails to do that in a lot of ways, just because it says like, oh, it's going to be this big spiritual text, but then it just feels like a textbook, which I guess the author doesn't want to waste any time. He gets into the quiet mind meditation on page 2. Very little introduction is given, like 1 page of exposition, then just gets right into it. So I can respect that. So it starts talking about quiet mind meditation, and then immediately goes to energy breathing right after. And that's where I have a hard time understanding, because it's one thing to tell me to meditate, and then it's another thing to tell me to feel the energy in the room and breathe it in. It doesn't really give much detail on how to do this. It kind of just tells you to do it. So I can't really judge much of the advice given in the later chapters, because I really just don't understand it at step 2. So yeah, and it goes from energy breathing, then it talks about remote viewing, and then it goes into chakras after. There's a lot of stuff about chakras, because it doesn't just talk about the main 7 chakras. It talks about 9 main ones and goes into different sub-levels of all those chakras. And not only does it just describe the sub-levels, it gives meditations for all the different chakras. And after that, it goes into energy manipulation, and as well as telekinesis and matter manipulation. He said like he knows like a real life waterbender, so I thought that was kind of cool. Then it goes to talking about channeling entities, and then talks about thought forms. I don't know if you know about the tulpomancy meta, like where you try to create an imaginary friend. That's not really what this is. This is kind of, if you're familiar with the occult, the ideas of the occult at all, this is more similar to servitors. Thought form he talks about seems to be like a manifestation of the higher self you would try to create. So yeah, what he talks about thought forms is more servitor like. Then he goes to talk about Kundalini energy. And something I thought was really interesting, he goes into next, is talking about DNA restructuring. And he says to do a quiet mind meditation and imagine the 48 helix code like restructuring into the way you want it to. I thought that was interesting. That would actually be pretty cool if you could pull that off. I don't know why that was the thing that, that made me excited. Then he talks about teleportation, and right after that, he goes into interdimensional travel. And then he talks about levitation. And then what I thought was interesting was the way he talks about time travel, and it's because he seems to be saying that there's different axes in time that you can travel. And it's interesting that he seems to think these are such constant axes to travel on time, even though time isn't real, in his opinion. But he talks about an elliptical timeline where you can travel like hundreds and thousands of years on this timeline. And then there's a vertical timeline which you can travel like hundreds of years, and then there's a rotational timeline which is about a century, and then there's horizontal timeline, linear timeline, which all get smaller in the amount of time you can travel forwards and backwards. So the linear timeline only has the barrier. You can only travel 24 hours in the future, 24 hours backward. And I don't know why he's telling us all of this, because wouldn't we just want to use the elliptical timeline? That seems like it would be the most efficient just to learn how to use that one. But I'm guessing what he would tell me is that the elliptical one is the hardest to learn, so you have to start with the basic ones that don't let you travel as far. So yeah, I thought that seemed like a bit of a more unique perspective on time travel than I've seen before. And then he talks about psionic balls, which I thought was funny for some reason. Just the idea, I don't know, maybe it's the word psionic ball that just makes me laugh. But he talks about him sitting down on a park bench and doing the quiet mind meditation, and then a psionic ball coming out of his forehead and like popping a trash bag. I I find that story funny for some reason. It feels kind of random. I don't know, I guess it just wasn't something I expected to read in this book. But I was thinking, that's all I'm going to say about the paranormal abilities. But I was thinking, like, even if this, I don't think any of this is real, or real in the conventional sense, I guess. But like, some of these techniques could be really interesting to like do in a lucid dream. Like, I want to try like creating a psi ball in my lucid dream. That would be cool. Or like restructuring my DNA in a dream to like shapeshift. I think that would be awesome. As well as time travel too. I'm not like, it would be cool to like travel the elliptical line of time just to see what that would be like. I think that would be cool. But some other things he mentioned, which I thought were interesting, he talked about something called the dark matrix, which seems to be like a manifestation of the shadow self, or some like satanic entity that's meant to deprive people of consciousness, and they call it a low vibrational being. So that was kind of interesting. And then they talk about the creation of man, and he gives one of his prefaces where he says, I can't mention too much because of the government, but then he basically says the whole thing. And then he says that 2,000 years ago, or 200,000 years ago, man was created by like an ancient race of aliens that you can still meet today or something. And he also said to be nice to them and treat them with respect if you see them. I thought that was nice. And he also claims that the government currently possesses spiritual warfare and is hiding it. And he also says that the government frequently checks up on highly advanced spiritual individuals to keep tabs on them, I guess. He didn't say much more than that because he can't say much more. And near the end, he also talks about like how he doesn't want to say much more about the creator or the one, as he puts it throughout the book, and says that it's really hard to put God into finite terms, which makes sense. And I guess with it trying to be like the next Bible, it makes sense that he wouldn't go into much detail or parables about God. Although I do think having some parables would be nice. That would be a cool addition. But yeah, I thought this book was really interesting, and like I said, I don't buy too much into the occult stuff. Like I think theoretically, like it could be real in a sense, but I think even things that may seem crazy are worth reading. I think even great texts that you might highly disagree with. I think even like I don't believe in the Quran, but I don't doubt that there might be some useful information in there. And yeah, and like I said, this might be useful for dream control. Some of this stuff would be cool.